Hi, I'm Femi OK. Welcome to one of my favourite stream shows of the year, the Faith Leaders Round Table. A rabbi, a reverend, an imam walked into the stream. Let's see what happens. They will be looking back at 2020. We'd love to hear about your 2020 as well. How did faith impact your year? If you're on YouTube, you can jump into the comment section and you too can be part of this discussion. We get started on our Faith Leaders Roundtable with Reverend Carden.
This year, I've watched faith help people survive through one of the greatest gifts God has given us, community. I've watched our faith community show up for one another by dropping off meals on doorsteps, by making masks for other folks, by teaching them how to use Zoom or Facebook or whatever for the first time, by praying, by hoping, by loving, by protesting for one another's lives. And as we've shown up in community, we've realized that while this year community may have felt like a risk, it's the only thing that gets us through, the only thing that keeps us alive, and it's the hope I have for all of the years to come.
Hello, Faith Leaders. It's so good to see you. I am going to say hello to you. You are going to greet our guest, Dr. Lewis. Tell our international audience who you are and what you do.
Happy holidays, everybody. I'm Dr. Jackie Lewis, and I am the Senior Minister at Middle Collegiate Church. We are the oldest continuous Protestant church in North America and the oldest corporation in the United States. We predate our country. We're a multi-everything congregation on the Lower East Side. I'm glad to be here.
Glad to have you. Rabbi Rittenberg, welcome back to the stream. Good to see you. Obviously, we know what you do by your job title, but develop that a little bit more. Lovely to have you on the stream.
I'm delighted to be here, Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg. I am scholar in residence at the National Council of Jewish Women, which is also a very old organization. We were founded in 1893 and have since then been mobilizing the Jewish community to fight for justice and safety for women, children, and families. We have now 180,000 grassroots advocates on the ground who push for just laws and fair courts.
Imam Latif, nice to see you. Please tell our audience who you are.
Sure. So nice to see you as well. My name is Khalid Latif. I serve as the university chaplain at New York University. And I'm also the executive director of the Islamic Center at NYU, where we haven't been around for that long in comparison to my colleagues' institutions, and that's so remarkable to hear how long you all have been around for. Our institutional memory is rooted in a student group that was founded in 1978 by a handful of Muslim students, but we now have about 3,000 Muslim students at NYU, and many people who live and work in the surrounding area that come to our center and see it as a community. We cater to about 10,000 people now from a diverse set of backgrounds in New York City, and are blessed to work with many different institutions that have similar visions and mission statements to our own.
So guests and audience, I always like to unpack a little bit of what happens behind the scenes on the stream. So this title for this show unofficially was 2020 was, and then we had a vernacular naughty word that I cannot say on the air. That was the subtitle for this show. Now, if you were going to fill in the blank, 2020 was, Dr. Lewis, what would you fill in the blank? No filter, go for it.
A fully hot mess.
I feel that.
Absolutely.
Rabbi, 2020 was
traumatic. Yeah, there were a lot of different kinds of traumas that were generated, and other long-standing traumas in our country that were surfaced in anew, really, not in new ways, but yet again, I would say.
Imam, 2020 was?
I'd say 2020 was revealing. And I think it was revealing of things that some segments of our society and community have known for some time, revealing of certain things that many segments of our society have sought to erase and hide, and revealing overall of things that I think no one can really be in denial of anymore in terms of how elements of race and class still determine who has and who has not, how there are people who are motivated by elements of the common good and will meet everything with selflessness and interconnectedness on the front lines, and people who are very self-interested and egocentric, and will always seek to cater to the majority and privileged. And I think it's very revealing also on an individual level of who it is that we are in terms of how we've responded to all of it.
What was very educational for me, and the stream is a digital show. We know how to be online, we know how to be in the virtual world, but was how quickly the rest of the world managed to navigate. If we can't meet as a community, how else do we get together? I want to bring in the voice of Fred Steller. Fred Steller is a member of the Hindu American Foundation. He talks about going online, the value of being online. Here he is.
One example I can think of how a faith community supports its members is Self-Realization Fellowship, known in India as Yogoda Satsanga Society, an organization deeply rooted in the Hindu yoga tradition. And ever since the start of the pandemic, they've been offering online guided meditations, yoga exercises, and scriptural studies, and offering tools to get us through this very stressful time.
Rabbi, how did you deal with the virtual world?
With mixed success, I think. The Jewish community as a whole pivoted pretty quickly to being on Zoom, even though there are all sorts of reasons in Jewish law that would extremely not be ideal. Saving lives trumps everything. And so for our ritual, for our holidays and Sabbaths, we went virtual right away with some bumps, but we did it. And at NCJW, we moved all of our learning online. We moved all of our gatherings online, and we moved our advocacy tactics to be digital, to be emails, to be phone calls, to be tweet storms, and not to be showing up in person in people's spaces. And it's been remarkable to see how much community can be built in these spaces. And we have to continue to remember that there is absolutely a difference between being in a screen the way we are now and being in physical proximity, and to be continually attuned to those who are more isolated because of the pandemic. They're more at risk. And at CJW, we set up a program, I think there are a lot of places around the world, where people then set up ways to check in on our neighbors who were most vulnerable and most at risk. And a lot of people got left, in the wider community. It's a fine line. There are so many things that we can't do in person, but I think the Jewish community as a whole and at CJW, really proud of how quickly and how well we managed to step up to do what could be done in the space.
Dr. Lewis.
Yeah, about 7 years ago, we outgrew our sanctuary. It sits 328 people, and we had about 1,000 members. And we tried to work around that by offering midweek worship on Wednesday and 2 worships on Sunday, one called Art and Soul, and lots of young people gravitated toward that. But when we outgrew our space and we're in a landlocked East Village location, Imam can tell you about what that's like, we decided to, quote, push our sanctuary wall back by beginning to build a digital church. We hired a digital minister, we got some cameras, and we began to do digital worship. And I think people loved it. They could wake up on Saturday morning, replay something from last Sunday, or on their phones or on their computers watch church. But really it was watching the backs of heads. So we stopped worshiping in our sanctuary March 15. And the very next week we were doing digital worship differently. Me sitting at my computer, talking directly to you, using archived pieces of art or creating new ones. And I have to tell you, I am so amazed at what happened for us. 250 people have joined our church since March. They've joined from Paris, from Ireland, from Chicago, from Chelsea. They found us, our progressive, multiracial, multicultural, actually interfaith church online. And it was easy for them to find us, and it was easy for them to join us. So our movement has grown. We've done lots of things for kids, lots of educational programs. And our big Revolutionary Love Conference that we have annually actually had more attendees this year than ever before. I think what we found is a justice, Protestant, modern meets old niche that people needed from us, and we were able to step into that. I do agree with the rabbi, the challenges, though, of just intimacy. So we're doing smaller groups now, 5 people, 7 people at a tea party to create smaller connections that more easily mimic the large ones. But our movement has actually grown in this 9 months.
Imam Latif, you have quite a young group of people that you have to take care of. You also deal with students. You are on social media. I love your Instagram. I love your tweets. You're out there. But turning really important moments like Ramadan and Eid and having that distance and not being able to be close together, how did you adapt?
Yeah, well, for starters, I just want to say, Dr. Lewis, I think the idea of a digital minister is an amazing idea. And I might steal that idea from you.
You can have it. It's great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the TikTok, Dr. Lewis.
Yeah, we just ordained her, Imam. We just ordained her Sunday. She can't believe it. 7 years in the making. And
she's amazing.
Yeah, she's great.
So great. Yeah, so wonderful. On our end, I think we adapted in a lot of the similar ways as most communities. We were doing a quick adaptation of a virtual program that had us now at times doing 8 to 12 programs a day, leveraging the talents and skills of our community so that in addition to spiritual and religious services that were now online as best as we could with restrictions on certain things that we weren't just able to do online virtually, we were doing things like yoga at lunchtime and story time for children and healing through the arts programs and how to create websites and write resumes, but a model that we seek to implement in person that has multiple entry points that caters to the diversity of our community. We now sought to transition to a virtual setting, and that included holiday services and other things. One of the things that we sought to do right off the bat was also give an opportunity for members of our community to still live their faith. We really like to tell them that physical separation doesn't necessitate spiritual disconnectedness, and that we can still aspire to be a reason that people have hope in the world instead of a reason that people might find dread in it. So a week into social distancing, right in March, we launched the first of a series of crowdfunding campaigns that in about 2 weeks raised over $600,000 and was the first of probably 5 or 6 campaigns that we then ran over the next few months to assist people who were impacted by COVID, people who lost loved ones, people who are ill, people who lost their jobs, they had no health care. Somehow we're the only country in the world in the midst of a pandemic that takes health care away from 5.5 million people. And over 3 months of time, we had 40,000 unique donations come in that got us close to about $2.6 million that we were able to distribute. But it wasn't any one person writing $1 million check. But I think leveraging a sense of ethic and value and cohesiveness and community to say that where you can even give $1, you can give $2, $5, and we all come together and really help people. And that then in turn made the holiday services and the other services that weren't what they normally were a different source of spiritual growth and a different source of transformation, because they were embedded within these other projects and campaigns that we were running to give people still an opportunity to really actualize and feel engaged of living their faith, so to speak.
That's so beautiful. That's great.
2020 wasn't just about a health crisis. There were other things that were happening that I know that you were all getting involved in. There was protests and also politics. I want to bring in the voices of Rabbi Hannah Spiro and also Pastor Lucius Doughton. They work in DC, Washington, DC. They work together. Have a listen to what they wanted to add to our show.
And we've been doing things together between our congregations for years now. But it's picked up during the pandemic, and it's felt especially powerful.
One of the things we did is that we did a 4-series talk and conversation on race during the pandemic. And doing that, we learned from each other that this pandemic touches everybody, no matter what our race, our economic status, our social background. It affects all of us. And we also talked about the impact that race does apply to this pandemic.
So, faith leaders, I have a number of questions for you from YouTube. I'm going to throw the questions at you. I need a very fast, instant response. I know you can handle this. This one is for you, Dr. Lewis. This is from Mitchell DeVilo. 2020 woke a lot of people up to government suppression and oppression. Your thoughts?
As an African-American person living in America, these were not new insights for me, but I do think the murder of George Floyd, the Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, all of those happening back to back woke up white people to racism and also woke up the nation to how much our national ethic is built on white supremacy. I think that's been a startling insight for some of my allies, but it's really truth.
Rabbi, this one's for you, again from YouTube. Should religious leaders call out world leaders when they do not uphold the values of their religion?
As appropriate. What a subtweet. As appropriate, as relevant. I think, as always, we need to remember that focusing on particular policies as unjust rather than entire people or entire nations as evil is the way to do that. But I think there are times and places when our moral leadership needs to extend and reverberate as far as injustice is happening.
Why did you laugh, Rabbi?
Because it felt, if that was actually directed to me specifically, and I don't know what the user, if they named me specifically, it felt a little bit like it might be asking about the occupation. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Often when I'm in an interfaith space, the occupation, Israel's occupation of Palestinian land, is an elephant in the room. And people want to know how I am showing up as a Jew and as someone committed to human rights vis-a-vis that gross violation of human rights, civil rights, and international law. And it's a complex topic and requires, to do it right, it requires a lot of teasing out. But the bottom line is you can and should criticize policies that are unjust and be clear about conflating that with demonizing the entire people.
Rabbi Latif, I'm going to ask you to respond to this briefly. This is from Crit Maria. How do we find unity in 2021? Whoa, that's a big question. Imam Latif, go ahead.
I think for starters, unity, I think, has to be real. And I think one of the things 2020 allowed for us to do was to understand that we are all connected to each other. And interdependence is something we then have to aspire towards. But individually, we can determine what we base our connections off of. And for us to be unified in those connections, I think we have to first understand what makes us separate and what divides us. And to me, good religion is one that brings people to taking on societal ails and illnesses. And there's no greater illness than racism right now. And if your practice of religion isn't bringing you to take that on, then I'd say, what's the point of your religion? And for us to come together in a way that's not performative or just convenient or tokenizing, people who are willing to come together have to recognize that there's a lot of people who don't want to be connected to people who have certain skin colors or come from certain levels of wealth or poverty, and they want to be very much disconnected. And that where we can understand that that has to be a stepping stone to becoming now more unified, not at the level of shared externals, but shared internals, shared values, shared hearts. We can't romanticize or be idealistic in terms of how we approach this as a concept. And I think, to echo what was said before, fundamentally, we have to be honest with the deeply entrenched anti-Blackness that is really entrenched in so much of what this country is built upon. And what we've seen in 2020 is that every system, from the prison system to the immigration system to the healthcare system to the justice system, does not honor Black life. And right now, for us to come together on anything that denies that erases that pretends like it's not there, that's not a real unity. And where governmental apparatus has quite often engaged in inequitous policies, for people of good conscience to come together in a way that I think is a real form of hope, because it's not denying now what many people go through that some of us just will never have to see in our lives.
Yeah, I want to bring one more
Amen.
thought into our conversation, if I may, Dr. Lewis. And I'll come right back to you, I do promise. This is Dr. Farha Abbasi, who's just thinking about what 2020 contributed from our psyches, from the mental point of view. Here she is.
Pandemics are like traumatic events. It completely disrupts one's life, bringing anxiety, fear, sense of helplessness, complete loss of control. People who have religion and spirituality in their lives, it's inevitable that in these times they turn to God. And this faith anchors them, give them the strength to weather these storms. This connection to a higher power brings them out of isolation and fear, give them courage.
So I have 3 minutes left. I have a minute for each of you. If I say preach, what would you want to leave us with, Dr. Lewis?
For all people of faith, and for people whose faith is in love, let us go to 2020 demanding that Black Lives Matter, demanding that we pay attention to the foundation of this democracy, and that will take us to eradicate anti-Semitism and eradicate anti-Islamic sentiment. It'll help us to think compassionately around women and children and people on the margins. It'll help us with our border politics. We have to start with the fundamental fault line upon which this nation was built, and that's racism, and make that go away with love.
Rabbi.
Amen.
That's my favorite length of prayer. Amen.
Our job on this planet, it is how we serve God. If that is a phrase that makes sense to you, it is how what's our job here is to take care of one another. That's all we've got. And that needs to permeate everything we are and everything we do. It involves looking at all of the systems of racism and inequality that have been set up in this country, all of the ways in which those in power are continuing to increase divisions between rich and poor, right? And that to further entrench systems of white supremacy. It involves overhauling the way we think about healthcare and mass incarceration and almost every other institution in our culture, so that every single human being can be free, can flourish, can be safe, can be healthy, and has the opportunity to pursue happiness.
Let me share this with you on my laptop. Imam Latif is coming to Instagram Live with me at 20:30 GMT. You'll be able to join in that conversation. We'll be talking more about this year for the Imam and what it was like. But if I ask you in a sentence, just to tease that conversation, Imam Latif, what would you say is your closing thought? Literally, a sentence. Go ahead.
I would say it's time for each one of us to recognize our own ability to be a source of light for people. And for all those of you who are watching, right now is the time to go out and really share your light with others. And you have it in you. You just have to choose to see it, to love it, and to then go out and spread it.
And this is the reason why the Faith Leaders Roundtable is one of my favorite stream shows of the entire year. Dr. Lewis, Rabbi Rutenberg, Imam Latif, YouTubers. Thank you so much. See you next
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you.